The laughter came right after the silence. That kind of silence that stretches, sticky and cruel, holding every breath hostage. Then she leaned across the kitchen counter, her nails tapping against her wine glass, and said it again, but softer, almost like a joke this time. I just needed a real man, you know? Then she laughed, light, careless, like she hadn't just thrown a grenade into everything we'd built. I stood there, still holding the takeout bag from Marco's, the smell of marinara and garlic knots creeping up into my face like some pathetic joke. I'd even remembered the extra dipping sauce. God. Behind her, the living room was still lit by the dim orange glow of the string lights we'd hung up together 2 winters ago. I noticed one had flickered out. I had meant to fix that. I fixed a lot of things. But I couldn't fix this. She didn't apologize. She didn't flinch. She just poured herself another glass of wine, the good kind I'd been saving for our anniversary, and told me she'd been thinking for a while that we weren't aligned anymore, that I wasn't ambitious enough, that I was too safe, predictable, passive. That's the word she used. Passive. Like I was a background character in my own relationship. And then she smiled like a cherry on top of a betrayal sundae and added, "Look, I didn't plan on it. But it just happened. He made me feel alive." I didn't say a word. I think if I had, I would have screamed, or cried, or begged. And I didn't want to give her that. So I just put the takeout on the counter, nodded once, and went to grab my keys. She didn't stop me, didn't follow. Just said over her shoulder, "Don't be dramatic, Cal. We can still talk later." That was around 9:30 p.m. I drove for hours. No music. No destination. Just me, the highway, and the sound of my own thoughts punching me in the chest. Somewhere around exit 47, I pulled into an empty church parking lot and turned off the engine. I think I sat there for nearly 40 minutes staring at the Hope Fellowship sign like it might give me answers. At 1:16 a.m., I finally turned my phone back on. 32 missed calls. All from her. The voicemail started off composed. "Hey, I just think we should talk." Then colder. "Are you seriously running away from a conversation?" Then frantic. "Where are you? Can you at least let me know you're okay?" And finally, "Please, Cal. I didn't mean to say it like that. I was just upset. You didn't deserve it. Can you please come back?" I messed up. I saved that last one. Not because I wanted to listen to it again, but because part of me needed proof that I wasn't imagining all this. That it really happened. She told me she needed a real man, and I guess she decided I wasn't one. But what does that even mean? Is a real man someone who slams doors and throws fists? Someone who walks in and takes what he wants without ever asking how you feel? Or is a real man just not me? Because I was the one who remembered the dog's vet appointments, who scraped together money for her grad school books, who stayed up rubbing her back during panic attacks. I guess that's not real enough. I haven't cried yet. I know it's coming. It's there, sitting just behind my ribs, waiting for the right crack to pour through. I'm still in the car. There's condensation on the windows and a weird buzzing sound I can't identify. I haven't eaten anything. Preston, our cat, is probably sitting by the door wondering why I didn't come home. I don't even know where home is anymore. And I think the worst part is, a piece of me still wants her to call again. The gas station I pulled into that morning was one of those places that looks like time forgot it. Dust on the windows, flickering fluorescent sign, a single vending machine inside with snacks that probably expired during the last presidency. I sat there, engine off, the stale taste of regret collecting behind my teeth. I watched the sunrise through a cracked windshield. It was the kind of sunrise people take pictures of, soft peach light spreading over the empty road, making even the ugliest buildings look poetic. But all I saw was the reflection of a man who looked like he had no business still being in love. I didn't sleep. My body was tired, but my mind kept playing everything she said like a horror film on loop. Every sentence, every laugh, every way she twisted the knife. It was the laugh that bothered me the most. Not the cheating, not even the betrayal, but that casual laugh, like it was funny. Like I was funny. Some joke of a man who didn't know he'd already been replaced. I finally checked my phone again. It was 7:41 a.m., 46 missed calls now. She was relentless. Texts too. The last few were scattered and desperate. One just said, "I made a mistake." Another, "Can we please talk before it's too late?" Too late for what? I tossed the phone into the passenger seat and stared out the windshield. The world was waking up, trucks passing by, a dad with a toddler in pajamas pumping gas, a woman in scrubs hurrying to her car. They all had destinations, people to see, plans. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a 2011 Corolla that smelled like spilled coffee and sadness, with no clue what to do next. And then, something happened that I still can't explain. A message popped up. Not from her, but from Maddox. Now, Maddox isn't someone I ever expected to hear from. He was Quinn's old friend from college, the artsy, smug kind who always spoke in metaphors and wore rings on every finger. We never got along. He once told me I had emotionally safe energy, whatever that means. The guy practically lived to make people feel small without ever raising his voice. His message said, "Hey man, not trying to stir things up, but you should probably know she wasn't exactly subtle last night. She brought him to the bar, introduced him as her boyfriend, loudly. That hit me like a slap. I reread the message 3 times. My stomach folded in on itself. She already replaced me. Publicly. Boldly. Before my seat at the dinner table even got cold. I sat there, gripping the wheel, trembling without moving. Not from rage. Not from heartbreak. From realization. She hadn't slipped. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a choice. She had rehearsed this, tested it out with friends, planned her exit like some twisted PR campaign. And when I didn't explode, didn't beg her to stay, I ruined her performance. I robbed her of the chaos she was hoping for. That's when I understood the voicemails. She didn't miss me. She missed the drama. The breakdown. The apology. The validation that she still mattered enough to destroy me. But I didn't give her that. I walked out. And now she was spiraling. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes for the first time in 24 hours. Not to sleep. Just to feel something that wasn't humiliation. When I opened them, I saw an older man step out of his truck and head inside the gas station. He caught my eye and gave me a small nod. That kind of nod that says, I've been there too. And maybe he had. I didn't respond. Just turned the ignition, backed out, and hit the road again. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing. Wherever I ended up, it had to be somewhere she couldn't follow. And deep down, beneath the numbness, I knew that wherever I went, I would never be the same version of myself who once believed love meant staying, no matter how much it broke you. I found myself driving toward a town I hadn't thought about in over a decade, Welton. It's where my aunt used to live before she passed, a tiny, forgettable blip on the map with one gas station, a church the size of a convenience store, and a diner called Midge's that still probably served waffles that stick to your soul. I didn't know why I was going there exactly, only that it was far enough from everything familiar, and I needed the quiet. When I finally pulled into the empty gravel lot outside the diner, it was nearly 10 a.m. The inside looked exactly how I remembered it: beige booths, sticky menus, a fan that spun with a mechanical wheeze. I chose a booth in the back, the same one Aunt Jean used to sit in when she'd sip iced tea and talk about her neighbors like they were characters in a sitcom. I ordered black coffee and dry toast because it felt wrong to eat something I might enjoy. The waitress, maybe in her 50s, gave me a strange look. "You look like someone lost a bet and got kicked out of the universe," she said, half smiling. I tried to smile back, but only managed a twitch. "Something like that," I mumbled. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be talked to. But apparently, life wasn't finished dragging me across gravel yet. Because just as I started sipping my bitter coffee, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Quinn. It was Maddie. Not a text. A call. Now, Maddie used to be our friend. One of our couple friends. We'd go on wine-tasting trips together and complain about work. Quinn always said Maddie was the sensible one in her group. So I answered, expecting maybe, just maybe, some humanity. "Hey," I said, my voice cracked from disuse. There was a pause on her end. "Cal, I shouldn't even be calling, but I thought you should know. She's telling people you had anger issues." I blinked. "What?" "She told Troy and a bunch of people that you got controlling. That you freaked out. That's why she had to leave. That's why she's with Travis now." Travis. The guy in the flannel. The real man. My replacement. Maddie kept talking, saying she didn't believe it at first, but then Quinn showed some screenshot, a message I supposedly sent months ago where I told her she was lucky someone like me loved her. And suddenly I was painted as toxic, insecure, unstable. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I just said, "Thanks for telling me," and hung up. It took everything in me not to throw my phone across the diner. Instead, I set it down gently beside the sugar caddy and stared out the window like I was waiting for my own ghost to appear. She was rewriting the story. Before it was even cold. Before I'd even had the chance to breathe, she was recasting herself as the victim. Me as the villain. And everyone, Everyone was eating it up because it made her look brave, empowered, liberated. That's the thing no one tells you. When someone betrays you, they don't stop at the act. They twist the aftermath too. They sanitize it for their audience. They give it hashtags and wine-fueled retellings, and suddenly you're a footnote in someone else's redemption arc. I must have sat there for an hour, replaying everything, every glance, every moment, every warning sign I missed because I was too in love with a version of her that never existed. The waitress came by again. "You want a refill?" she asked. I looked at the coffee, then up at her. "Do you ever regret staying?" I asked. She studied me for a second. "Every day," she said. "But I regret leaving more." That didn't help. I paid, left a tip bigger than I could afford, and got back into the car. I didn't start the engine. Just sat there, phone in hand, heart in pieces. I pulled up the text again. Quinn had sent another one 10 minutes ago. "I don't know why you're ghosting me. This isn't who you are." And that's when I finally replied. "You're right. This isn't who I am. But maybe it's who I should have been all along." I had sinned. And then I blocked her. I didn't feel powerful, or victorious, or anything remotely close to okay. I just felt exhausted. And somewhere, deep in that exhaustion, a small voice whispered that maybe the road ahead didn't need to include closure, or revenge, or even understanding. Maybe I just needed to keep driving. I hadn't planned to go back to the storage unit. In fact, I didn't even remember I still had one until I passed the old sign on Route 17, Ridgeview Lock-In Store, first month free. It triggered something in my brain. A flicker of memory from 4 years ago, when Quinn and I moved into our first apartment and shoved all the things that didn't fit the vibe into that freezing metal box. My grandma's lamp. A crooked bookshelf. Boxes of books she said were too depressing. Most of it was mine. Most of it didn't make the cut. It felt right, somehow, to visit it again. A place where forgotten things went to collect dust in silence. I still had the key. That's how little I'd changed over the years. I kept old keys in a drawer, just in case, like some desperate part of me hoped I'd always have access to the past. The door groaned as I rolled it up. A stale breeze hit me in the face, smelling like cardboard and mildew and some lost version of myself. I stood there in the doorway for a long time, not moving, just letting the cold air seep into my bones. I spotted the lamp right away, still wrapped in a yellowed blanket. My high school yearbook stacked unevenly in the corner. A guitar I'd promised to learn how to play. And tucked in the very back, behind a pile of flannel shirts and a broken blender, a dusty plastic bin labeled in Sharpie, "Cal stuff. Do not toss." I laughed out loud. A sad, stupid, breathy laugh. Because I remember writing that label, like I was already defending myself from some future betrayal. As if I knew I'd one day be standing alone in front of it, covered in road dust and regret. I sat down on an old camping chair and opened the bin. Inside were the things that never made it to the apartment. A framed photo of me and my dad fishing when I was 10. A stack of birthday cards from my mom. And, at the bottom, my old writing journals. I hadn't touched them in years. Quinn used to make fun of them, not cruelly, but dismissively. "You always write like life is some kind of indie film," she'd say, scrolling through her phone while I sat beside her with pen in hand. I stopped writing eventually. I stopped a lot of things. But now, sitting in that dim unit, wrapped in the quiet kind of loneliness that feels almost sacred, I flipped through the pages. There were old poems, half-finished essays, letters I never sent, dreams I had written down, dreams I never even tried to chase. And something inside me cracked. Not in a dramatic way, not like a breakdown, but like the soft give of a rusted hinge, the quiet surrender of something that had been holding on for too long. That's when my phone buzzed again. I shouldn't have checked it. I had blocked her. But she found a way around it. A different number. This time, the message was short. "He left." 2 words. No context. No apology. No explanation. Just that. I stared at the screen, and for the first time, I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel vindicated either. I felt detached. Like someone had told me the weather forecast for a country I'd never visit. I powered off the phone and buried it in the bin beneath my journals. I didn't want to hear her voice anymore. I didn't want her drama bleeding into my new silence. But just as I stood up to leave, I saw a small envelope wedged behind the bin. I pulled it out. It was addressed to me in Aunt Jean's handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single piece of lined paper. In her usual, no-nonsense style, she had written, "Cal, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably lost again. Remember this. People will try to convince you your softness is a weakness. Don't believe them. They only say that because they're scared of what they can't control. You're not broken. You're just too deep for shallow people. Love, Jean. I read that letter 3 times before folding it and putting it in my jacket pocket. And right there, in that dusty, forgotten place, I finally decided I wouldn't go back. Not to her. Not to the apartment. Not even to the version of myself who thought love meant sacrificing your voice just to keep the peace. I left the storage unit unlocked. Let the past breathe a little. And as I walked out into the cold morning, I knew. I had no map, no plan, no home. But I finally had something better. A beginning. I didn't plan to see her again. After everything, I thought I had drawn a permanent line in the sand. But as with most things in life, it wasn't that clean. The past has a way of creeping back, not always with a bang, sometimes with a quiet knock on the door when you least expect it. That knock came 2 days later. I had found a cheap motel just outside of town called Bridgepine. $29 a night, mildew in the corners of the ceiling, and a heater that wheezed like it had smoked a pack a day since the Nixon administration. I didn't mind. It was quiet, and no one knew me. The old man at the front desk had thick glasses and didn't ask questions. That suited me perfectly. I spent most of my time walking. No destination, no headphones. Just me and my thoughts. At night, I scribbled into one of my old journals from the storage unit, trying to write again. Not poetry, not letters, just observations. Lines like, "The world keeps spinning even when you don't." I never realized how loud silence could be until it started answering my thoughts. Love, when twisted, becomes the perfect weapon because you handed it to them yourself. On the 3rd morning, I went out to get coffee from the vending machine in the lobby. And that's when I saw her, Quinn, standing outside, arms crossed, hair tied back, wearing one of my old sweatshirts like she still had the right. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating, like my guilt had grown legs and decided to confront me in person. But then she turned, met my eyes, and I felt it. That sick twist in my stomach that always came when you realize the person you once trusted most can still rattle you without even saying a word. She took a step closer. "I had to find you. You blocked everything." I didn't speak. I couldn't. She looked thinner. Not physically, just emotionally reduced. Like something had deflated in her. Her voice didn't carry the same bite. Her confidence had cracked. "He left," she repeated, confirming her earlier message. "Travis, the guy she paused, thought was what I needed." I stood still. My coffee was growing cold in my hand. She continued, "Turns out, real men don't care about you when you're crying at 2 a.m. or spiraling over stuff they don't understand. They want the performance, not the person." I didn't react. I told my friends what happened. They said you just disappeared, like I broke you. "You didn't," I said finally, voice low. "You revealed me." She blinked, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means I finally saw who I was with. And who I became because of it. I lost myself somewhere between keeping you happy and keeping quiet." She looked like she wanted to cry. But she didn't. "Quinn never cried when it mattered." "I thought you were weak, Cal," she admitted. "I thought your softness was something I could walk all over. I thought I needed something louder. Stronger. But I didn't understand that strength isn't about who speaks the loudest." "Too bad you figured that out now," I replied, staring past her, watching a crow land on the motel sign. "It's not your timing that hurts. It's the fact that you waited until I was gone to see me." Silence. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled envelope. "I found this," she said. "It's yours. You wrote it 2 years ago. A birthday card you never gave me." I didn't know you felt that way." I didn't take it. I didn't even glance at it. "Did you feel that way when you laughed in my face?" I asked. That landed. She stepped back. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." I gave her a tight nod. "You should be. But that doesn't mean I owe you my healing." She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned around slowly. As she walked away, I noticed her shoulders were shaking. Maybe from the cold. Maybe not. I didn't chase her. I didn't call after her. I didn't even watch where she went. I just stood there for a moment, letting the words settle in the air like dust. Back in my motel room, I placed the untouched coffee on the nightstand, grabbed my journal, and wrote something new. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's a locked door, a full tank of gas, and a version of yourself you no longer have to explain. That night, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't still hurting, but because something heavier had finally been set down. I didn't leave the motel right away. even after she was gone. Something about that conversation had rooted me there for another night. Not because I needed time to recover, oddly enough. I felt clearer than I had in months, but because I finally had no urge to run anymore. Quinn's apology, though incomplete, had closed a door I'd been too afraid to slam shut myself. The next day, I did something small that felt huge. I booked a cabin. Nothing fancy, just a quiet little place up in Hawk Pines, a couple hours away. I remembered it from a trip I took with my dad when I was 15. Back then it felt isolated. Now it felt safe. The road to Hawk Pines twisted through deep woods and sleepy towns. No billboards. No phone reception. Just trees and fog and my own breathing. I stopped once at a farmer's market stand, bought a jar of apple butter from a woman who didn't ask any questions. She just smiled and said, "Sometimes sweet things come from broken ones." That hit harder than I let on. The cabin sat on a hill above a frozen lake. Wood creaked under every step, and the water pipes groaned like ghosts in the walls, but it was mine for the week. A place untouched by her memory. No photographs. No scented lotion on the sink. No echo of her laugh filling up the corners. It was the first space in a long time that felt like it belonged to just me. The first night, I lit a fire. Not for warmth, the heater worked fine, but because I needed something alive in the room. Something real. I sat in front of it with one of my old journals, and for the first time in years, I didn't write about pain. I wrote about possibility. But just when I started to believe the worst had passed, the phone rang. The landline. At first, I didn't move. Who even knew I was here? The number was unlisted. I had paid cash. But the phone kept ringing, sharp and surreal. I finally picked it up, heart hammering, expecting to hear static or some wrong number. Instead, I heard Maddox's voice. "Cal, listen, before you hang up, please." My grip tightened around the receiver. "How did you get this number?" I asked slowly. "I didn't. Quinn did." "Of course. She's not okay," he said. "I know you don't owe her anything." "I know. But I think she really snapped this time." I said nothing. What was I supposed to say? That I cared? That I was surprised? She lit the match and scorched her own house down. What came next wasn't my job to fix. "She told everyone you emotionally manipulated her," Maddox continued. "That you isolated her, made her feel small. And now that Travis is gone, she's unraveling. She's trying to claw her way back, but it's ugly." I laughed bitterly. "I never even raised my voice to her, Maddox. Ever." "I believe you," he said, and I could tell he meant it. "But not everyone does. And she's talking about doing something stupid. Dramatic. You know how she is." "She always wanted an audience," I muttered. "I just thought you should know," he said softly. "In case it hits social media. Or gets messy. I didn't want you to be blindsided." "Thanks," I said, though the word felt heavy with irony. He hesitated. "You were always better than we treated you. I'm sorry for being part of the problem." That one landed differently. I hung up without another word. Not out of anger, just fatigue. I stood by the window for a long time after that, staring out at the frozen lake. My reflection in the glass looked older. Not just tired. Altered. Like the man I'd been at the beginning of this week had died somewhere back on the highway, and I just now noticed the funeral had passed. Later that night, I found myself reading old texts. Not from her, from me. To her. Messages I'd sent over the years. Encouragements. Random thoughts. Silly things I wanted to share. Birthday wishes. All of them met with emojis, half replies, or silence. And I realized something brutal. I had been the only one showing up for a long time. Not just physically. Emotionally. Spiritually. I showed up for her in ways she never returned. I gave her the best parts of myself, hoping she'd eventually notice, maybe even cherish them. But she didn't want real. She wanted loud. Flashy. A mirror she could pose in front of. I had never been a mirror. I had been a window. And she never looked through it. That night, I burned a few pages of an old journal. Not out of rage, but out of release. Words I no longer needed. Stories I didn't want to carry anymore. And as the ashes curled into the fireplace, I whispered to myself, not as a promise, but as a simple truth. She may have found another man, but I finally found my way back to myself. It was close to midnight when I heard tires crunching over gravel. I was sitting in the cabin's tiny kitchen with the last of a lukewarm mug of cocoa, watching the fire dwindle. I hadn't turned off the porch light, a small mistake, apparently, because someone had found me. I didn't get up right away. Part of me hoped it was just a maintenance guy, or maybe someone lost. But deep down, I already knew. The moment the engine stopped and the headlights died, The silence that followed wasn't the silence of a stranger. It was charged. Familiar. A knock followed. 3 slow raps against the door. Not urgent. Not panicked. Almost like she knew I was just sitting there, waiting. I opened it. Quinn stood in the dim glow of the porch light wearing that same stupid sweatshirt. Mine, the one she'd taken months ago, swearing it was the only comfortable thing I owned. Her face looked washed out, eyes hollow, lips dry and chapped. In her hands, nothing. No suitcase. No apology letter. Just herself. "You tracked me down again," I said quietly, stepping aside just enough so she could see the room behind me, but not enough to invite her in. She didn't try to move forward. "You won't return my calls." I thought if I could just say it to your face. "You already said everything that mattered. And a lot that didn't." She winced, and for a second I saw her confidence peel back like old paint. "I didn't expect Travis to leave." "There's the problem," I said. "You expected him to stay after you blew up your entire life to impress him." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "No, let me talk. You always talked. You controlled the narrative, Quinn. You rewrote the story before I even had a chance to understand the plot twist. I became the bad guy in your breakup script, the soft man who wasn't enough. But guess what? That softness was the only reason I stayed as long as I did." Her lip trembled, and for a moment, I thought she might break down. But Quinn wasn't the type. Instead, she stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "I lost everything," she whispered. I shook my head. "No. You let go of everything that made you safe. You wanted excitement, chaos, whatever made you feel alive. And I was collateral damage. I thought you were boring," she admitted. "You made life too predictable. I wanted to feel like I mattered again." "And how'd that work out?" I asked, not to be cruel, just honest. Tears formed in her eyes but didn't fall. "He left 2 days after I told him I loved him. He said I was too complicated. That I came with emotional baggage he didn't have the patience to unpack." I could have told her that. I could have warned her that surface-level thrills don't build anything worth keeping. That drama doesn't make you deep, it makes you exhausting. But she wouldn't have listened back then. And now? Now it wasn't my job anymore. "You don't get to knock on my door because your storm didn't turn into the hurricane you wanted," I said. "I'm not the evacuation plan." That shut her up. She stood in silence, arms still hugging her sides, like she was trying to hold herself together. Then, slowly, she reached into her back pocket and pulled out a folded photo. "I found this in your old drawer," she said, handing it to me like it was some kind of offering. I glanced down. It was a Polaroid. Us. From 3 years ago. We were sitting on a picnic blanket. She had just thrown a grape at me, and I was laughing, not posing, not filtered, real, unedited laughter. It struck me how happy I looked. Not because of her, but because I still believed in what we were building. "You can keep it," I said, handing it back. "That version of me doesn't live here anymore." Her hand shook as she took it. "I'll go," she said finally. "I just wanted to say goodbye in person." I nodded. "Then do it. And mean it this time." She turned slowly and walked toward her car. No drama. No parting speech. Just the soft sound of regret trailing behind her footsteps. When the engine started, I closed the door and locked it. Not out of fear. Out of finality. Back inside, I stood by the fireplace, letting the warmth soak into my skin. Then I pulled out my journal and wrote without stopping for the next 3 hours. I wrote about shame. About silence. About what it feels like when the person you loved most starts treating you like background noise. But I also wrote about strength, not the kind that shouts or conquers, but the kind that walks away without looking back. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like. I had no idea where I'd go next. But I knew this much. The man Quinn had abandoned didn't exist anymore. He'd been buried beneath her smirk, her laugh, and her careless cruelty. And now, finally, he was gone, and someone stronger had taken his place. The morning after Quinn drove away, the lake behind the cabin had started to thaw. Just a little. Thin cracks in the ice shimmered like veins under glass. It wasn't much, but it was something. A shift. A signal. The kind of small change that tells you spring is coming, even if you can't feel it yet. I stood at the edge of the dock, hands in my pockets, breathing in the frozen air. My thoughts weren't racing anymore. They were still. Not empty, just peaceful. For the first time in months, there was no pressure to fix anything. No one expecting me to shrink myself to keep the peace. No one twisting my quiet into weakness. Just me, and the sound of the wind through the pines. I spent that final day in the cabin without speaking. Not out of sadness, but because it felt good to hear myself think. I made oatmeal. I fixed the broken door hinge. I even played a few awkward chords on the old guitar I dug out from the storage unit. I laughed when I hit the wrong notes. There was no one to impress, no one to disappoint. That night, before leaving, I packed only what mattered: a small duffel, my journals, the letter from Aunt Jean, and a note I wrote to myself, folded and tucked into my coat pocket. It said, "You didn't lose everything. You just lost what was holding you back from becoming who you were always meant to be." I left the cabin cleaner than I found it, locked the door, left the key on the mat, and then I drove, not to run, but to move forward. That was the difference now. I wasn't escaping Quinn anymore. I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. I ended up back in my hometown, a sleepy, blue-collar place with too many dive bars and not enough bookstores. But it had something I needed: quiet roads, friendly strangers, and a small local college with an opening for a writing instructor. I applied on a whim. They called me back in a week. I started teaching 2 evenings a week, creative nonfiction. The class was small, but I loved it. I loved watching my students write the truth with trembling hands and surprised eyes. I recognized myself in them, in their quiet bravery, their messy honesty. I even reconnected with Maddie. She reached out one afternoon, not to talk about Quinn, but just to ask how I was doing. We met for coffee, talked for hours. She apologized, genuinely, for not seeing things clearly when it mattered. And I didn't hold it over her. People grow at different speeds. That doesn't make them evil, just human. We've stayed in touch ever since. Nothing romantic. Just 2 people who know what it's like to watch something burn down and survive it. As for Quinn, I never heard from her again. Not directly, anyway. I heard from mutuals that she moved to a different state, changed jobs, started therapy. Maybe she's healing. I hope she is. But I no longer carry that weight. Her story is hers now. Mine is mine. And mine is fuller than it's ever been. I still write every day. Some of it ends up in my students' hands. Some of it is just for me. I'm not chasing approval anymore. I'm not afraid of silence. I'm not afraid to feel deeply, or to walk away from those who mock it. I thought I lost everything when she smirked and said she needed a real man. But what I found was something so much better. I found me. And honestly, I've never been prouder to be this soft, quiet, steady version of myself. Because now I know, real doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes, real just has to stay.